Welcome to the We Have Podcast.
Hello and welcome. My name is Vitaly and this is my brother Sam.
Hey, I'm Sam. We're out here. We're excited to launch this off officially. It's going to be a podcast about literally everything and about anything, but we're going to try to keep it godly and in a manner that is...
Funny, godly, and good.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good.
It's going to be really good. We're going to enjoy it. We're going to talk about basically, like we said, everything and anything, but it has to be godly.
Mm-hmm.
Cars is considered godly because that's a creation of God. So we will talk about a lot of cars and building engines. But our main subject is biblical in the Bible, and we'll go from subject to subject. Anyway,
but today we're going to talk about the heart of David, which is kind of an interesting subject because David is a very relative character in the Bible. He's been through most of trials that life can throw at you. It's very relatable.
Yeah.
Life is very was very difficult for David, very difficult, and the way he combated that, the way he sought God in it, the way he combated his highs and lows, very relatable.
Yeah, David is one of those characters that you cannot. It's not enough talk about. It's always everyone wants to talk about, and it's the most interesting. I want to say it's one of the most interesting men in the Bible, besides Jesus. Jesus is the most interesting man, but David is one of the interesting men because it says he's the man after God's heart.
Yeah,
and that's now we want to hear the heart of David. What made him the man after David's heart?
after God's own heart. God's own
Sorry,
heart.
yeah.
So one thing I want to start off is why was David so significant compared to Saul? Because Saul was the first king of Israel, right? He was anointed.
Yeah.
He was like the chosen one of God as well. He was. So what made David so much more different than Saul? What do you think that?
I think the biggest thing with David and what made him such a significant character in the Bible is how David perceived people's opinion versus God's opinion. And I think that's the big character over there of David is he cared more about what God thinks of him than what people think of him. And I think in everyday life, that's what God looks at is, are you going to care what God says or or do I care what people are going to say about me? So I think Samuel has a prepared really interesting subject and slide. I actually excited to hear it. I really want to hear the whole what he has prepared. So I'm just here to listen and actually kind of ask questions. So Samuel's the one that's being interviewed here in a way.
All right. We'll start off with 1 Samuel 17, verses 34 to 36. This is a story where this is a battlefield where David walks on the battlefield. He's being sent by his father to go carry supplies and food to his older brothers while there's a war going on. And he sees this Philistine, this giant Goliath, mocking God. And he talks to Saul. He's like, Saul, let me go and kill this guy. Let me go kill this guy for you. And Saul's like, what makes you think you're qualified for this? And this is David's resume. He goes, verse 34, David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it and struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. And
Wow.
He goes, this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of the... Just imagine, it's believed that he's been between 15 to 19 years old. He was a teenager.
It's a young it's like a young guy, young kid that has killed a lion, a bear, and pulled a sheep out of a lion's mouth. That's kind of impressive.
Dude, like, okay, being full-grown men, put me against a lion or a bear, dude, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way.
I'm running.
There's no way. And he's like, no, I ran after them.
Jeez.
But this just shows that, like, David was very courageous.
No, it's just and it says in the Bible he was filled with the Holy Spirit. I think the only way he was able to do that is he was filled with the Holy Spirit. It says the Spirit of God was up on David. So that alone, when you hear it, it's kind of like almost sounds like a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Yo, you ran after a lion? Like, yeah, and a bear. It sounds like someone from Russia. I run and kill a bear.
He probably was from Russia. No, but it's wild. And then he's like, yeah, when the bear turned on me, the lion turned on me, he's like, I struck it and killed it. So he
Yeah.
had to bare bone wrestle these things
Jeez.
and overpower and kill them. And it just shows how courageous he was. And I want to outline a couple of characteristics of David's heart, since we're talking about the heart of David and the heart of a man who was after God's heart.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we see is David was extremely courageous. I mean, there's a saying that Saul slayed thousands and David slayed tens of thousands.
Yeah.
In today's society, we hear a sniper takes out 100 kills in his career,
Yeah.
and that's like impressive. That's like a
It's like
two-time
it's like,
medal.
dude, you're dark. You could kill 100 people. Dang.
That's
Imagine
crazy.
David.
10,000.
10,000 men. Jeez. And not only that, when he killed them, he had to get a piece of their skin and bring it to Saul. That's impressive.
That's
It's
another
like he
story.
had evidence. He had evidence of 1,000 kills. Jeez, some of you guys playing video games are like, yeah, I have 3,000 kills in a video game.
It's calling all the COD players out. It's like, yo, y'all think y'all have kills? Talk about David. This is our actual. Homie was bloodied.
Yeah.
Homie was bloodied. So he had courage.
A lot of courage.
And then second thing, we see David as this man who didn't take disrespect for the things of God. He just straight up did not take. He had this reverence,
Meaning
this fear of God.
you don't disrespect my daddy, my father, my God. You don't disrespect him. Is that what you mean by
Reverence, yeah, fear of God.
Yeah.
Like that same story that we talked about earlier, how David went to give his older brother supplies. He's talking to the army. He's like, David asked the men standing near him. He goes, "What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes his disgrace from Israel?" And then he follows up with, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And we see this theme all through the scripture, the Kings to
Kind of like,
Samuel's.
how dare you?
Yeah, it's like you're talking about my God, and he's mocking them, and
Yeah.
and the armies they're just sitting there shivering. But we see this underlying theme all through the story of David, how even when he was hunted down like a dog by Saul for no reason,
Yeah.
but just to get murdered by Saul, he had so many chances to go and slay Saul.
Never did. Jeez.
There was a moment where he was in a cave, where Saul came to the cave where David was actually in. They had no idea. And when Saul went to sleep, David had this perfect opportunity to go and slay
Basically
Saul,
butcher kill him.
And
and
he cut off the corner of Saul's.
Why do
cloak.
you think he was afraid to kill Saul? Why was his fear of Saul?
I think it was a reverence. I think he was more afraid of knowing that he was anointed and that Saul was anointed. And he's like, he understood that he was setting the precedent. So he's like, if an anointed one killed another anointed, he was setting a negative precedent.
Yeah.
But because he had such reverence for God, he's like, no. Because God anointed him, God should be the only one that can take him
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
So he set this standard
of
of what it means to be anointed.
that's good.
But that he was a man that was after God's own heart, had a fear of God. And then we see one of the most probably underappreciated characteristics of David is he had this deep emotion.
Yeah.
He had this tender heart. We see this also through Psalms, and the way he was so genuine with God.
He was emotional towards God, not towards, I guess, life, but towards the things of God. Anything that had to do with God, he was super emotional towards it.
Genuine, I'd say.
Genuine. Yeah.
And that goes to having a tender heart. I don't think a man can be that open and that I guess have that much feeling towards something without having a tender heart.
Yeah.
When it comes to things of like spiritual, God things, holy things. In today's society, we have this like macho man mentality, where I don't need to cry, I don't need to show any emotions, I don't need to why do I need to raise my hand in church, and why do I need to do all this extra stuff? But I think we're missing the point. And the point is that we actually, I think we all cry.
Yeah, especially when we take those long showers. That's when we cry, so nobody can see our tears. But now, all jokes aside, I think David, um, his biggest thing is I have so much respect and love for my father, for my God, that everything is emotional to me. He was never emotional about life.
Mm.
He was never afraid of people or things. When it came to God, that's the only time he was emotional.
Yeah. I mean, he's a man of war. He had a reputation of dead bodies, so like you can't be emotional with that.
Yeah.
That's another side that we forget. And he's a warrior. He's a
Yes,
slave.
I killed 10,000. It's nothing. But when it comes to God, it's like a whole different man.
It's a whole different man.
So it's like a character switch. It's like,
I think it was a tender heart. That's what it was.
I think so. Towards God.
He was he felt the pain of others, and he felt the connection that people had to God as well.
Yeah.
Because look up Psalms, he talks about these super emotional highs and lows, and actually we have Psalm 42 here that he was so open about his emotions. Psalms 42 goes, he's like, as a deer pants for the streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God and for the living God. Where can I go meet with God? This is like, you don't just write this thing, these kind of thoughts down without having this deep sincerity, this deep connection to the divine.
Yeah.
Like, man, where do I meet with God? Like, how can he craved and he yearned for that connection with the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, it says, night and day I seek you. I read your word. It's also Psalms.
Mm.
So he made an effort to seek God and God's face, God's favor. But God's favor was over his life. If you look at David, God's favor was over him. I guess he was afraid to lose the God's favor.
Yeah, it does say, like, don't take your spirit from me multiple times.
Meaning,
The fear of God.
Yeah. Your favor, your spirit, yeah.
The fear of God. And well, we can talk about the characteristics of David all day long, but it doesn't really connect to anybody unless there's application involved.
Yeah.
And I like this quote by MLK, which means the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but when he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And it goes back to the saying that the true measure of a man is how he reacts whenever he doesn't receive what he hopes for. So David, he had these great characteristics. He was very courageous, very brave, while he was tender-hearted, and also he had this reverence for God. But it's not until we see him fall into this deep trouble where we actually see these things played out. And I think that's where we connect most with David and also understand his intentions, his heart behind it, and why God chose to call him the man after his own heart.
Yeah.
And I want to dive straight into story of David and Bathsheba. And
Bathsheba. We all know that. Why do you think? Okay, when you read a story of Bathsheba and David, is David a bad guy or a good guy in this story to you?
David's like a villain.
Villain, yeah, that's
Straight
what I
up.
see. It's like, how dare you, David? Like, why would you do that? It's like one part of David that you're like, oh, you're a bad guy.
It's one of the few stories that David was in fact the ultimate villain.
Yeah,
Like 100% of the time.
he goes from a man of God, most highly respected and loved, to like, I'm gonna do this thing, selfish thing, and it's kind of like, in a way, he messed up,
Oh yeah,
and he
big
knew
time.
he messed up.
And those of you who don't know this David and Bathsheba story, we'll give you guys a quick recap. There's a time where kings go to war, as it's said in the book of Samuel, usually the springtime. And David decided to take a little break. He was probably like, I just want to take a little season off,
I'm just gonna chill at home, have a bath, just
relax on the roof.
relax on the roof. Yeah.
And he was relaxing on the roof, and he saw this beautiful woman bathing on her roof, at a distance. And he sends one of his attendants out to find out who this woman was. And they came back and they're like, yeah, she's married to the man named Uriah. And that doesn't stop David. Like David was like, all right, invite her over. I want to meet this woman. One thing leads to another, and David ends up getting her pregnant.
So she was married to a man that was at war,
Uriah, yes.
Uriah, and he came and took her while she's being married and basically had intercourse with her.
So the war that David was supposed to be at, this man was fighting David's war.
Yeah.
And then the act was that he, while relaxing at home, goes, finds this woman who he knew that she was married and still had committed adultery with her. And ultimately, to cover this act up, he calls Uriah from the war, right? It's like the most human nature 101. Calls the guy from the war and he's like, hey, bro, you've been working hard.
Yeah.
Go ahead and go home and relax with your woman. And Uriah, being the holy and righteous man that he was, he's like, man, my brothers are dying out there. Why should I go and relax while my countrymen are fighting and getting slayed? So Uriah refused to go home. He didn't go. Said actually that he rested or he slept at the doorstep.
Oh wow! He did not go inside his house.
He didn't go inside. He didn't want to get tempted.
Sheesh! What a dedication.
I mean, Bathsheba probably was fine. He's like, bro, I don't even want to get tempted.
Yeah, if I'm gonna see her, I'm gonna be all over this. Like, babe, stay inside. I'm gonna be out here.
He's probably just screaming through the window, like, I don't want to see you.
Yeah.
Just throw me a blanket through the window. I'll be chilling.
Yeah. Make me that sandwich and stay inside.
But the story isn't in there. So Uriah refuses to go to his house and enjoy with his wife. And so David's like, man, I'm still stuck with this pregnancy. And I got to cover it up somehow. So he tells Uriah to come back the next day. And he's like, all right, I got a message for you. Take it to the general of the armies. And the message was that whenever there's fighting, the heaviest in the front lines, he told the general to put Uriah at the front lines and then step back and let the enemy kill him. Essentially, he signed him a death certificate.
Yeah, he basically,
And Uriah delivered his own death certificate.
Yeah, without even peeking and looking at it. That's dedication, and geez,
that's the righteousness that Uriah had. And so
and Uriah wasn't even a Jew.
He wasn't.
He was a Gentile.
He was a Gentile. Yeah.
So he's a Gentile that converted to Jew, and he wanted to prove his faithfulness. There's a book. It says, sometimes your friends can, not be as faithful, but when you make your enemies your friends, they're gonna be the most faithfulest people in the world. Why? Because they always they'll prove
they have to put their word.
Yeah, their word. Like they're afraid. Like I want to be his friend, so I will do everything possible to prove my worthiness to them. It's actually a book. I think it's something 48 Laws of
Power.
I think. Yeah, it's a good book, but I don't think I finished it yet. But it's one of those examples. Is like that.
But going back to the story, so David ends up marrying Bathsheba and having this child, which is his. And we don't know how much time elapses between these events, but a prophet, Nathan, gets summoned, and he comes to David, and he's like, David, he confronts David essentially with an example, and he's like, he tells David that because you have sinned, there's these long lists of curses that are gonna occur in your life. And David does something interesting. I think that's where he distinguishes himself between David and Saul. The biggest distinction right there is that he admitted to his fault. Like right there, he fell on his face. Verse
he didn't
13.
deny it. He said, I know. I messed up. So he didn't deny what he did.
Yeah, he's like, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin. You're not going to die. So even then, that's already a mercy right there.
Yeah.
That's like a huge, that's a big, David should have been struck down for committing, adultery, murder. He almost hit the trifecta if he hit something else. But that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But then Nathan goes to say something else. This is kind of where we want to start off from. The Lord has taken away your sin. You're not going to die, but because by doing this, you have shown utter contempt for the Lord. The son born to you will die. So after Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had bore to David, and he became ill. See, notice how the Bible calls Bathsheba Uriah's wife.
Yeah, she's still yeah, was his wife, even though in a way he's already dead, but the child was of David, not Uriah's. And it's crazy, she didn't have any children. She wasn't pregnant. She did. They don't. That Bible does not talk about Uriah's and her having kids.
It's always David.
It was always David.
Yeah, and
So
I kind of want to start off from there. It's David, verse 16. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted and spent the nights lying in sackcloth on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him and to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them. So we see this like David
humbled, fasting.
royally messed up. I mean, royally messed up. And the fact that he didn't get struck down right away by God was already mercy. But I think David had also that emotional aspect where he's like, God, I messed up. I should have paid for this. Please revive this. Please. So he let it all out.
Yeah.
He cried out to God, and he did everything he could. I mean, he understood that he messed up. He understood his fault. But I think that's where we see the genuine.
Don't you think let's say David had many kids, right? He already had lots of kids. But why do you think he cared so much about this kid particularly?
I think it was just a father's heart. I think David was just a father. Where anybody who's a parent, you don't want any of your kids to perish.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you can think of. As men, we're not wired to bury our kids.
Yeah.
We're not wired to carry that concept of death to our children, because in our psyche we understand that we're gonna go first, not them.
Yeah.
I think it was a plead. Nobody wants to lose a child. That's immense pain. But I think the lesson here is just in this verse is death always brings, or the pleading for death always brings pain. And I think David understood that, and he's like, I don't want to go through that pain as well. And so he just goes back to point number one, just let it all out. David let it all out. He was so genuine with God's, even though he messed up.
Yeah.
He was so genuine to the response of that he just fell down, fasted, and praying and weeping. And a lot of times, I think, when things happen in our lives, we tend to bottle them up. We tend to hold them. We tend to keep them constrained and think, I got this figured out.
Yeah.
I don't need nobody's help. I'm just going to bury this, and it's going to be all right. But I don't think that's not a man after God's heart, or a person or a woman, That's not somebody who's after God's heart. It's not in the intention of God for you to bottle things up and keep them inside and pretend like you're all right.
Yeah, so it's okay to let out. It's okay to let go and cry and show a little bit of emotion.
We don't like to admit it, but like I said earlier, everybody cries in one form or another.
Yeah.
Either on the inside,
in silence,
in your shower, in silence.
Yeah.
There's many forms of crying out there. It's not just tears, and typically for men it's pain. Men cry from pain.
Some men get quiet, they shut down, and they just don't say anything for days.
Yeah.
That's their cry. Some men go fishing, want to be alone. That's their cry.
Yeah.
So I know a guy that goes fishing every day. He cries a lot.
Cries a lot. Yeah, you should talk to him. Hey, bud, you all right? Need some help, some therapy? But he let it all out, and I want to continue on. So this is like the story goes on. So on the seventh day, the child died. 2 Samuel 2:18. David's attendants were afraid to tell him that this child was dead, for they thought, while the child was still living, he would not listen to us when we spoke to him. How can we now tell him the child's dead? He may do something desperate. So they're scared. They're like, dude, we don't know what he's gonna do. He's gonna do something rational. He might hurt himself or hurt somebody else, and maybe not in that extent, but they knew that this was a big deal for David.
Yeah.
His response was so out of the norm. And David was smart. It says David noticed that the attendants were whispering among themselves. He realized the child was in fact dead.
Yeah.
And he asked, "Is he dead?" And they answered him, "Yes, he is." And then reading on, David does this like the most outlandish thing, 180 degree that I've ever seen in scripture, which David got up from the ground after he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then when he went to his own house, and at the request, they served him food, given that he was fasting all this time, and he ate. And his attendants asked him, they said, "Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept, but that the child now is dead, you get up and eat." And this is his response. I love David for this, because this is such a big lesson. He goes, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept, and I thought, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring back what is dead?" Basically, I will go to him, but he will not return to me. So
one day I'll see him, but I will no longer. He's gone. Basically, he does 180. As soon as he finds out the baby's gone, David's 180. He stops fasting. He stops. He cleans himself up and give me food. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Like nothing ever happened.
He's like, brush aside. He's like, well,
yeah.
I think that's a big part of knowing God's heart. He understood that it was never God's intentions for him to stay weeping, to
For
stay
days and days, yeah.
moping, and to stay in that depression, to stay in that in the pits. He understood the heart of God so much that he was like, it's over, it's done. There's no saving this at this point.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's no use of turning it around. And that concept is so hard to grasp for us, because we like to do the opposite of this, which is bury the dead things.
Yeah.
Burying the dead things, and he did it like almost immediately. Like he did it mentally. He just buried his kid. Maybe there was a funeral procession later on, but we see how fast he buried it emotionally. Got up, put lotions on. And I think a lot of times in our life, we have this issue right here, burying the dead things.
We keep on trying to bring him back to life. Come on, God, please, even though they're dead. Like, come on, no, God, I don't agree with you. Like, I want it back. I want it like this. God's like, it's already gone. But we just keep on begging for it.
It's okay to plead, to fast, but when something is put to death, it's time to bury it.
Yeah.
But we like to revive things, try to revive them, try to get them back. And I think the hardest part,
CPR. Come on.
I think the hardest part about letting go of something that God put to death in our life is letting go of the potential. Letting go of the potential of that thing, the hope that we put into that thing. So a lot of things, we hope that this would be beautiful. This would be amazing. Maybe David hoped that his son would be king one day. He hoped that maybe his child would be the next great ruler, that would usher in this peace, or not that he always hoped for. And he had this potential that he held on, that we all could hold on to.
What if he's gonna be great? What if? Yeah.
I think that's where we suffer as men and women of God, and as people, that we hold on to the potential of things, and we won't let them go. And the crazy thing about potential is, in physics, potential is an object at rest. It's an object at rest.
Yeah.
It has no movement.
It's ready to do something, but we don't know what it's gonna do yet.
It's a dead thing.
Yeah.
Potential is mostly recognized in something that is dead per se. And I like the example that I think you told me this about the graveyard. If you want to share that.
Oh yeah. It's actually, I think, Miles Monroe. He's the one that said it. He said the most the most priceless place on earth is the graves. And I'm like, the graves? And he goes, yes, look all the people that died with all these talents that he never used. Imagine you had a talent to paint pictures, to control choir, to do the choir, to be a pastor, to be a leader, to own $1 billion company, but you never use that potential. You never use that talent to be the man that you're supposed to. So people end up dying with all these unused talents. For though makes that graveyard the most expensive, priceless thing in the world.
Mm.
Of all the unpainted paintings, unopened businesses, the things that are supposed to be ideas that never came to life, that never came to be, and for that makes people that died with their unused talents
Mm.
are still could have done it, but
Potential they had.
the potential they had that was never used. So yeah,
And I think a lot of that is like when it comes to when God puts things to death in our life, we don't like that. Why? Because we like Him to do things on our time,
yeah.
but we forget that God is
I
sovereign.
want it today. If in fact I wanted it yesterday.
But He's sovereign. Like we forget that God is sovereign,
Yeah.
and He does things with however He wants it, whenever He wants it, and with whom He wants it. And those are the three things that we like to control.
I was gonna ask, what's the biggest thing? I guess we'll keep on going. Saul. We'll talk about Saul in the future a little bit farther, but
Mhm.
let's keep on going then.
To burying the dead things.
Yeah.
So as we go on, I kind of want to highlight something David said. He goes, that now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back? I think David knew his limits.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to know our own limits too, because there are things that we try to control in our lives, try to micromanage, we try to facilitate and try to adjust and focus, not understanding our own limits.
Yeah.
And David was a very wise man in that he understood. He's like, it's dead, it's gone. Why should I go about and trying to adjust the situation to what I want it to be? And look what he did. Look at the first thing that David did. This is kind of like when I started dissecting this kind of threw me back. So David got up from the ground after he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. David went back to being a king.
He didn't stay in his bomb clothes or his
Sackcloth.
and ash on his head.
He straight up got up, washed his face, got some food, became a king again. And I think that's a big lesson, that in times of trouble, when things happen, when things die in our lives, that we need to go back to our routines,
Yeah.
go back to our callings. Some people when they get hit with something with life, when they get slammed, get the wind knocked out of them, they stay in that misery, they stay in that moping, they stay in that depression, that anxiety, they stay in it. David understood God's heart to the extent when he's like, this is not God's will for me.
Yeah.
This is not what God intends for me. And so after he realized that the child was dead, that the situation died, he went back to his routine. He went back to being a king. He went back to his calling.
Yep. He's calling. That's good.
And I think a lot of us have this issue where we go through something and we kind of just forget how to smile.
Yeah.
We forget how to be genuine again. We forget that there's better things out there, that God's will for you is to continue on, to move forward. And it goes back to the saying that when you've done everything you can do, all that you can do is keep on going.
Yeah.
And even secular psychology, it's crazy. It's taken from helpguy.org. This is like after disaster, getting back as much as possible to your normal routine will help minimize the traumatic stress, anxiety, and hopelessness. This is like secular psychology teaching us that doesn't matter what happens, you have to get up and continue on.
Yeah.
You have to continue back on your routine, on your schedule. That even doing so will minimize the results of that.
In a way, having that little snap out of it
Mm-hmm.
and keep on going. But even though sometimes, like, let's say, if someone loses a favorite loved person, some people take months, sometimes years to mourn that person. I miss him or her. I can't, just basically they get into this little routine of misery. And David's just like, I'm done. Next.
So getting to the right routine too.
Yeah. So, wow, that's very good life lesson.
And I think it goes back to letting go of that potential.
Yeah.
That's true when you're talking about the emotional aspect of love. or losing someone that you love, a
Yeah.
child, a lover, or something. People don't let go of the potential.
Yeah.
They hold on to it for years, decades.
Could have been like this. It could have been like, what if it was alive? We could have had it like this. Could have been so much better if it was alive, you know? Like there's a thing of Jack and Rose. They said there's like I don't know if it's a movie or not. I think there's a movie where Jack was alive and Rose was alive. They had like another life and it was like a miserable life, you know?
Oh, they actually made it alive.
Yeah, basically they made it alive and they had a miserable life. He was like abusive husband, whatever, you know? So, but all about the Titanic version was she was like, she thought he was the most best thing that ever happened to her, and she, most of her life, she like didn't even, you know, I don't know if she got married, but she basically like mourned his death, you know, like, oh my gosh, what if,
That was the whole concept of the movie. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. And it's true. Like we like to look at the positive aspects of that potential, but what about the negative aspects?
Yeah,
Like, what if this thing could have destroyed
yeah,
you? You know, what if this thing that you hope for, emotional, you know, romantic, or whatever it was, even with
Yeah.
the child, in this example of David, what if this child could have been raised to be the most evil king and ended the
could
reign
have
of
killed
Israel?
David, his mom, and destroyed the whole Israel.
It could have been extremely evil, like
Yeah.
next to the Antichrist. We don't know.
Yeah,
But also in life, like sometimes God takes things away from us and we don't understand, but with God there's always a bigger picture.
yeah, that's the thing. We don't see the big picture. We see the little puzzle that we're in, but the we don't understand that this little puzzle makes a huge picture. It's part of a big picture that God is painting, and that's what sometimes to us it's hurtful. We think like, God, you don't understand. God's like, you don't understand. Look at my beautiful picture I'm painting right here.
Mhm.
You're just a little puzzle that fitting in here, you know. That's why God is always amazing. He knows best, and they say if you want to make God laugh, tell him your
Tell
plans.
your plans, yeah.
I had so much plans with her,
But God,
with him.
that's true.
Yeah,
God's like, well, I got something better for you.
yeah,
And then going on, you know, David's initial response, his final response was so profound. It says in verse 20 that after he cleaned up, went back to his and being a king again,
yeah,
back to his old self, back to his senses. He says he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped.
mm,
And I think one of the most difficult aspects of faith, of being a Christian follower of Christ, is worshiping despite of our circumstances.
yeah. Put it
Worshiping,
behind us, and God, I'm thankful that this is good. I am grateful that I have this. Focus on the positive things.
yeah. the
David's
positive.
like, thank you for still keeping me as a king. You
I
know?
mean, he still had the kingdom, you're
yeah,
right?
he was still a king. God didn't remove him. So,
But he was extremely upset. We read earlier verses, but also I think when it comes down to worship, when it comes down to circumstances and worship, we forget that God is not really concerned about things.
yeah,
He's not really concerned about the result or the journey. A lot of us over obsess about being in our calling. David's calling was being a king, was being a warrior. We over obsess about these things and we try to get there as fast as we can. But we forget, we undermine that he's more concerned about the heart,
yeah,
about the soul, about the eternity of that person. So it's taking something away out of your life means salvation. A good father will do that.
yeah,
And we forget about that. But I love David's heart here because he went straight to the house of the Lord and worshiped him. If we look over here, there's 4 psalms that were confirmed that were written after the confession, after the sin with Bathsheba and murder of Uriah, and Psalms 32, 51, 86, and 122. And I want to read a little snippet from Psalms 86. It's so beautiful. And just believe that this is like the Psalms he wrote after the child died.
yeah,
So it goes from 86. He goes, "Hear me, Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Guard my life, for I am faithful to you. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I call to you all day long. Bring joy to your servant, Lord, for I put my trust in you. You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abundant in love to all who call on you. Hear my prayers, Lord. Listen to my cry for mercy. When I am in distress, I call to you because you answer me." Like, this is him after losing a kid.
oh,
This is him after like probably burying
Yeah.
a child, and these are the words that he's talking to God. He's like, "Have mercy on me, because when I'm in distress,
Yeah.
even though David should have died, and his because of his sin, a death occurred in his family.
Yeah.
He's like, when I'm in distress, I call to you because you answer." Like, he understood that Christ, God, at the time, I guess Christ wasn't there yet, but God at the time, he was the only one that understood him. Even though he was at fault here and God still had mercy on him, he understood that God was the only one that could fix the situation.
Yeah.
He was the only one, and he turned to God. And I think that's what we see a lot of the heart of David, the man after God's own heart, that despite of his distress, despite of his circumstances, he still turns to God.
Yeah. He never cared what people thought, what people said about him. It's only what God said about him, what God thought of him. That's amazing.
And we see this another psalm after the death, or after this confession of sin with Bathsheba. Psalms 51:10, he goes, "Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me." And sometimes, like, we go through things and we tend to undermine that. What if the trial, what if the death, what if the unforeseen circumstance, whether caused by us, by others, or, like I said, unforeseen circumstance, what if the answer prayer towards that was a pure heart? What if the situation was meant to be to cultivate a pure heart in you?
Yeah.
And what if the answer to the prayer was a steadfast spirit? Because David prayers these things. He goes, "Create in me a pure heart, O God, and a steadfast spirit," after the fact all these things happen.
Yeah.
So he understood a valuable lesson, that he's like, man, maybe at that time David's heart was a little more tender towards God. Maybe it was a little more softer. Maybe it was a little more open. And the word steadfast means firm. It means fortified. It means you know where you're at. And maybe because of this, he was so much more fortified in God. That he was so much more firm in his faith. And that his connection with God was so much more intense after this, because he chose to trust God despite of circumstances. I think it's a very powerful thing.
Yeah. Wow.
But like all stories, like all stories of death and redemption in the biblical stories, we like to drop the mic on, like, it ends right there, but it doesn't.
Yeah. This villain David still becomes the favorite God's.
He's still a hero. He's still one
a
of
hero.
God's.
From villain to hero.
With God, like, there is always redemption.
Amen.
Like, there's one of the names of God in the Bible is El Goy. I think I'm saying it right, but it means the Redeemer.
The Redeemer, yeah.
Which
always
translates,
the way out.
The Redeemer translates to, means the one who bought back.
Okay, wow.
And we see this in the continuation of this story, which is the redemption of what David brought sin and death into, which is the precursor of man bringing sin and death. It's an example of, it's a Christophany.
Yeah.
David brought sin and death into the situation, and look what God does. 2 Samuel 12:24, we see David comforts his wife Bathsheba after they already buried the child.
Yeah.
And he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. And this is the craziest part right here. The Lord loved him.
He loved
And because
Solomon.
the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah. This is like...
So the name of Solomon, the real name is Jedediah, not Solomon.
Jedediah was his actual God-given name.
Wow.
But this is like the only time, as far as scripture goes, this is the only time that God looked at a baby and openly said through a prophet,
I love him.
I love him.
Well, there's one where it says Isaac I loved, and
Jacob
I hated.
This is like,
vice versa. Yeah.
But we don't know the timeline on that.
Yeah.
It was actually before they were born, I believe.
Yeah. Before they were born. Yeah. One
Side
I love.
note.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he's just kind of proving the point. But yeah.
This was like a baby. Like, after he was born, God looked at him. He's like, if there was ever divine,
Yeah.
or divine, I guess, favor,
Yeah.
this was it right here.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
looked at a baby and he's like, this is gonna be somebody I'm gonna love the rest of his days.
No matter how much he's gonna mess up, I'm gonna love this one.
And you know what the word Jedediah means? It means beloved by God.
Ooh. Now
And
that's
this is
a good name.
this is significant because up at this point, there was only 3 characters in the Bible that have ever gotten a rename from God. There's only 3 characters in the Bible. And we look
Who's
at
that?
this was first was Abraham.
Okay.
He went from Abram
Which
to
is a big, big father of the whole Israel.
Abraham to Abram, which Abram means father,
Yeah.
and Abraham means father of multitude of nations.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
And his wife Sarah, Sarai, and then Sarah, which Sarai means princess, and God named her the absolute princess over many.
Wow.
So she's like God gave her an upgrade. And then we have Jacob, like you mentioned. Jacob was born and he named him to Israel, which one who prevails. That's what it means. One who prevails with
and
God.
God said, Jacob I loved. Okay, wow.
So
Yeah,
the one he loved, he
the one
changed his name.
loved, yeah, he changed his name. Wow.
And then also the fourth one, the significant. That's how significant this birth was. God changed Solomon's name to Jedediah, the beloved of God.
Yeah.
And if we look at Solomon's story, there has never been a more prosperous time in all of history of Israel
Yeah.
where this during the reign of Solomon than it was ever before. He ushered in such a wealth in the nation.
Yeah. I think there's a thing that says that it had so much wealth that silver was no longer like a currency. Like it was like meh. It was like rocks on the street. That's how much it was. There was so much silver that it had very little value. Like you see a penny laying in the street. That's it's just a silver coin. Gold coin, gold's always gold, but silver was like meh. It's just silver.
Like devalued. He
Yeah,
devalued the
so much of
entire
it.
standard of currency.
Yeah, it had. Imagine the city is so wealthy that everything is gold, but silver's like no. Basically, it had value, and people would, of course, use it, but it was not a big deal.
Mm.
That's how wealthy it showed how wealthy the Israel was back in the day. In fact, I think almost every nation around Israel was paying Solomon money,
Tribute, I believe so.
tribute, yes, gold, whatever, so there won't be war between them, or people kind of like keep us protected from other countries. In a way. I don't know what's the word. Tribute, you said?
It was tribute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tribute, as in protection as well. But also we see the queen of the south.
Yeah.
So we see people of a royal standard cross massive distances just to come hear this man.
Yeah.
So God gave him wisdom, such favor, and wisdom comes with favor too. Favor comes with wisdom. But we just see how David introduced sin and death into his family, and then how God turned it around and turned favor and life.
Wow.
So he still gave him a son. He still gave David a son, and not only did he give him a son, but he blessed this son to such a degree that he became arguably the greatest king in all of they've ever had in Israel.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah,
not a more peaceful
supposedly,
time.
like you said, the people traveled over a great distance just to hear him speak. There's a book. It's not in the Bible, but it's some man traveled great distance to hear Solomon talk about birds. All he did is talk about birds, and that was one of the most interesting books to those people because he had so much knowledge and wisdom about birds. Why does it do that? Why is it chirp this like this much in the morning? Why is it built like this? And people said it was the most interesting anything he spoke because of course Solomon had the most wisdom in the Bible. Like there's the most wisest man
Ever lived.
not including Jesus. Jesus is the wisest of all, but Solomon was the wisest ever lived, and to hear him speak about anything was like, dude, we have to go thousands of miles on camels through the desert just so we can hear this man speak.
It just shows you the favor,
Yeah.
and that it kind of goes back to Romans 8:28, one of the most common phrases in the Christian culture, and we know that those who love God, God works all things together for those who love Him. We're called according to His purpose.
Come on.
And it's that's so true. Like any dreadful story that we see in biblical literature, God's like always turning it around.
God can always turn into something good.
Like we forget that. Pop my neck a little bit. We forget that God can do anything.
Yeah,
Like
nothing's impossible.
we have this like skew image of who God is. That's why we're talking about David's heart, because David understood God's heart,
Yeah,
and he understood that God can do anything. That's why even in those verses he was like, who knows? Maybe God will be gracious to me and heal my kid.
yeah,
We forget that God can do anything. Like if he wanted to snap his fingers and make you one way or another, or turn this situation around, or do this, he could.
yeah,
And that's not a problem. It's not a hard thing for him. But the fact that he doesn't speaks volumes. That there's a bigger picture.
yeah.
That there's a bigger lesson to be learned here. And sometimes it requires a little bit of patience and time.
Yeah. I was gonna ask. I guess Saul. So Saul was God's anointed,
Mm.
and David was God's anointed. What do you think the biggest difference between Saul? Why did David was God's favorite, but Saul wasn't?
Well, I think David had, like you said, this character of doesn't matter what people say, what people think. It matters what God thinks. So David was a pursuer of God. Saul was a pursuer of man. So whenever trials came, and trials will come, no one's exempt. In a matter of being a king, because it says in Proverbs and all these wisdom books that the words of a king sway a nation. So if someone's to be ruling an entire nation of Israel, God's people, they best be wise and understanding, and somebody who can actually lead his people towards God, not away.
Yeah.
The way Saul led was he led himself and his people away from God. And little acts of disobedience here and there, they were still precedents, because he was the first. He had the standard set
Yeah.
because he was the first.
This is a crazy question coming up, so get ready. So we all know in the Bible that God is in charge, God is in control of everything and all things. God knows the beginning, God knows the end. In fact, God wrote the beginning from the end, meaning he first saw the end and then he wrote the beginning. So he knows everything. Now, don't you think God somehow I guess God somehow pushed David towards Bathsheba, or it was God's way of like, let's see what happens.
Mm.
Let's see, or do you think that it was just pure David's will to get Bathsheba?
And I think there's a reason why the Lord's Prayer has, and do not lead us to temptation, written into it.
Yeah.
And that's Christ himself teaching his disciples, and do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. So he's not talking about Saint leading into temptation. He's talking about God leading into temptation.
In a way, testing us.
Yeah.
And seeing like, what are you gonna do in that situation? Like Job in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Everything got taken away from Job.
Yeah.
Everything. And his first words were, naked I came, naked I will leave. Meaning, no matter what situation happens in your life, doesn't matter what kind of situation, the whole heaven and the whole hell, eternity, everything looks at you. They're gonna hear. They're like, what's his first words? What he's gonna say? Is he gonna curse God? He's gonna bless God. Job blessed God.
Yeah.
David got on his knees and said, I messed up. My fault. I'm sorry. He didn't say, oh, it's not my fault. She was that good looking. You know, Saul, after he messed up, he said to the prophet, praise me in front of people. Honor me. Go and honor me. He didn't care what God's going to think of him or what God said, but he said, honor me. He wanted that glory for himself. You see, I believe everything, it says in the Bible that even your step, God knows your next step. He knows what's he leads you by that.
Directs your steps.
Directs your steps. So if he directs every one of our steps, I'm talking about chosen people. There are chosen, and then there are, we call it drifters. Chosen ones, that means God predestined them to be on this earth to do his desire for his kingdom. Those are the chosen people. And there's a lot the Bible talks about his chosen ones. But God knows exactly what they're gonna do. But when God puts them through test, he's expecting something out of them. You can't get gold without fire. You can't get pure gold without fire. You need to put it through fire to get
Can't
pure
get a diamond
gold.
without pressure.
Yeah, that's why God's like, I want to, diamond without pressure. That's why God's like, I want to see pure gold. I want to see them pure diamonds. I want to see them purified. So that little test, sometimes it's little. To us, it's little. But for David, it was a big deal. It's a big fire he went through.
I mean, I think it goes back to the concept of when we get to heaven,
Yeah.
right, as a whole body, do you think God's going to be like looking at us and be like, wow, this guy's a wimp?
Yeah.
like he didn't go through any trials, any
Complain
temptations,
about everything.
Like, I think to bear the weight of child of God,
Yeah.
you have to be able to bear that weight.
Yeah.
You have to have the
Bear that
capacity.
fire. That you got to go through that fire and come out on top and say, thank you.
Like I don't think there's any wimps in heaven. That's what
Yeah.
I say. There are no wimps. There are no weaklings in heaven. Those who get there are the ones who stood the trial, who stood the test, who were tempted, who were trialed, and have just trusted God through it. You know,
Yeah.
David didn't always pass every test,
So,
but he trusted God through it,
yeah.
and God redeemed his situation every time. And I think that's the lesson in this is, even though, you know, we mess up or things happen to us or circumstances, the test, as you will, even if you fail it, it's like how much do you trust God
Yeah.
to carry you through it? How much do you trust him? Because at the end of the day, it's you're a child,
Yeah.
you're a son, you're a daughter.
You're an inheritor of a most high God. So
Yeah,
you
if you trust it, it's like how do you expect to get up to heaven and be like, God, I didn't do anything? I was like, I know, sucks.
Yeah.
But that's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's more like when you walk in, it's well done, good and faithful servant. What is the well done for? It's, hey, you've done it.
you endured.
You endured. You.
I mean, of course, we can't leave out Jesus Christ. Everything happens through Jesus Christ. We have faith. We get saved through Jesus Christ. We get to heaven through Jesus Christ. The only way to God is through Jesus
Yes.
Christ. But at the end, in a way, it's kind of like Apostle Paul. He goes, these things that I've done, I'm supposed to do those. But what attitude you do it with? Just like Jonah. When Jonah God said, go preach to Nineveh, he goes, no, please, runs the other way. God's like, no. So you don't understand. You have to preach no matter what. But what attitude are you gonna do that with?
Yeah.
Meaning, there will be trials. You understand? There will be trials. But the question is, what attitude are you gonna do this with? Are you gonna be like, no, how dare you? What? You're still gonna go through it. But is it gonna be, thank you. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
Thank you for creating me. Thank you for making me. Thank you for giving me this life. And I was able to live and to know and to be grateful for every day, every moment of oxygen I get to breathe. Kind of like, do we live with this gratefulness, or we're like Jonah? Like, no, I don't want to preach to them. I know you, God. I know you're merciful. You're gonna save them. So no, I'm gonna run the other way. It's the attitude. Paul said, I'm gonna endure till the end. I'm gonna run this race and I'm gonna win. Like, I am planning to win this race. And he ended up being crucified upside down.
Yeah.
But to him, it was
Gruesome
like,
death.
it is honor to die for Christ. It is honor to die for Christ.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
Praise God. God is good. Anyway, this is Samuel Vitali. We're with VSM.
VSM. MSM with mainstream media. We're not about that. VSM podcast. We're gonna try to do segments like this in and out, and we'll see where this takes us.
Please share, like, and subscribe. We hope to see you soon.
See you guys. Have a good one.